So Flying Turtle asks, Morning Ren, curious if you saw Sven's statements that Larian's team wasn't excited about D&D anymore and had combat ideas that weren't compatible with D&D. I'm curious how BG3's lessons will impact the future. So I think the easiest way to look at that is the same way every time someone has ever asked Daniel Craig, hey, are you excited to do another Baldur's Gate, or are you excited to do another James Bond movie right when he's doing press for the one that he just finished and has just come out? And he's always like, I would rather, give birth. He's like, and James Cameron, actually, someone just asked him, are you excited for the next Avatar? And he's like, I'm literally doing press for something that I just spent the last several years of my life on. The last thing I want to do right now. He's like, that's like asking a woman who's giving birth, are you ready to have another one? Like, I think that when people see comments like that from a team, they might assume that that means that the team didn't like working on D&D. And I think we've seen that that's actually the furthest thing from the truth, because the entire Larian Studios team, through the entire Baldur's Gate 3 development cycle, talked about how it was a dream come true. They were the ones who pursued the partnership with Wizards of the Coast. They loved working on Baldur's Gate 3, but it was also something that consumed their lives for like 6 years. And when something consumes your life from a creative perspective, um, the last thing you want to do is immediately turn around and do more of that. Sometimes it's more fulfilling creatively to work on something completely different. Um, I think the idea of them having combat ideas that weren't compatible with D&D, you have to understand that with Forgotten Realms in particular, you're working within someone else's universe. So you're working within someone else's rule set. There are things that you can't do because you're working with someone else's rule set. There are combat rules that you can't um, breach because you're working within someone else's rule set. There's spells that you have to be adherent to, spell rules. There's the rule set itself. Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, which they were using at the time, is a completely different rule set than to what they have with Original Sin 1 and Original Sin 2. And when you are a creative team and you're wanting to expand your creative wings and go, here's the thing. We were this small company that built up a reputation over time. Then we built Baldur's Gate 3. We had access to more money. We were able to do cool things with that money. And then that game went and blew up. And now Larian has big boy money. And they went, well, shit. We can finally build a Divinity game in the way that we want to without being constrained by a small Kickstarter budget. Now we have enough money to fund the entire thing from start to finish and do it in a way that allows us to have the absolute maximum amount of creativity possible, and also have this massive reputation where people are going to immediately and instantly buy all of our early access stuff and give us an infinite amount of funding. So we have this opportunity to build this massive game with the next Divinity game. Had I been in Sven's shoes, I would have said the exact same thing and be like, you know what? Working with Wizards of the Coast was a great experience, but the team's already been there, seen that, done that. We conquered that mountain. We worked with Wizards of the Coast. We did the D&D thing. It was great. We're not excited about it anymore. We just, James Bond, Avatar, we just finished. Like, we're going to go off and do something else now. And maybe, in 10 years, we circle back around and we'll be excited about it again. But right now, we've got these ideas percolating that don't work within this 5th edition rule set. And they're things that we want to do creatively, which we can't do when we're working within someone else's IP. Because we can't just go off the book and do whatever we want when it's an IP that Wizards of the Coast controls. Like, that's a consideration for sure. That was a super chat question. Thank you very much for that. I think there was a follow-up to that too if I scroll down through chat here. What's up, Thandar? Good morning. Good morning. I know there was a follow-up. Where's it at? Oh, there it is. I just never don't. There might have been a typo though. Never done. Oh, never done. I've never done game dev, and was curious how having a team constraint from a known IP can impact game development. I'm excited to see Larian with big bucks doing their own thing. I don't think there's a restraint. It's I can say this is because in my early years as a writer, I was doing a lot of work for other clients, and one of the biggest projects I did, there was a guy who worked in uh, private contracting and like oil in Dubai. This is back in like 2009, maybe 2010, and he brought me on to write a show Bible, essentially a series Bible for an MMO. And that project was basically I had 7 or 8 different phone consultations with the guy, a couple of video calls where we were going over all of the things, and I'm taking copious amounts of notes. And then he sent me like a 30-page document which had all of his world building that he'd already done, and it's his setting, it's his world, and everything else. And then he had me take that and write a short story that took all of those elements and put it into something that was a short story format that he could then take and then convert into a screenplay or whatever and use as something to fund a short film to use to pitch to investors. And so a part of that was also creating like a more concise show Bible using all of his notes. It was like a 6-month project where all I did was work on someone else's world, taking their notes, refining all the ideas. I wrote a short story. That short story is actually, I'm going to plug my own shit really quick. I have a sci-fi and fantasy anthology that I wrote years ago, back in like 2018 maybe, called Bloody Knuckles. It's over on Amazon. You can get it. And that short story is actually in that anthology for anybody who might be interested. I didn't find that to be constraining at all. It was just I'm working with someone else's stuff. So it's like anytime I came up with a creative thing, it was like I had to get on the phone and call and be like, hey, what do you think about this? That's the only really limitation there is when you're working with someone else's IP. Whereas when you're working on your own IP, you don't have to have that phone call, which means it's quicker to iterate and get something from idea stage to implementation stage because you're not having to like get on the phone and confirm and make sure that the idea is good, and maybe the client wants to have a back and forth, and they might have some ideas that they hadn't thought of when you give them your idea. They might tell you that they don't like your idea and that they want you to just shelve that, and you go, okay. And if that happens, you take that and you put it in a different notebook and you save that, because when you're done with that project, you can circle back around and pull that idea out of your notebook and use it to create something else that you can do that's completely independent of that project. So I don't think from my perspective it's constraining. It's just there's a little bit of extra time being involved because you're consulting with someone else. Now, if you're being compensated for that time, who gives a shit? Like, you're on the clock, right? But yeah, I don't think it would be constraining. But some people might have different opinions. There are some people who don't want to be constrained creatively, and they don't, I would also say I've never spent 6 years working on someone else's IP, so I can't speak to what that's like. I think the biggest time I worked on someone else's IP was that project, which was 6 months. I can't speak to that. Maybe there is an aspect of spending 6 years working on someone else's IP that maybe feels a little tiring at that point. And it's like, you know what? We've done 6 years. It's time to branch off and do our own thing. So I think that that's legitimately a viewpoint to take. Oh, I didn't realize there was an archer in there. Is that a dog shooting at me? Hold up. Oh my god, that dog has a crossbow on its back. Anyway, let me scroll through and make sure we didn't have any other parts of that conversation that left on the floor. Larian unplugged, pretty much, yes. Bandar says they loved the process and the product, but knew they needed something fresh to not burn out. Correct. Like I said, that's every time they interviewed Daniel Craig right after finishing the most recent James Bond film, he was like, ugh. Talk to me in 2 years. Right now, the last thing I want to do is talk about another James Bond film. I'm like, creatively, that's all I've worked on for the past 3 years. I want to go do other indie films. I want to go do theater projects. I want to do something else creatively. I don't want to always only ever be doing James Bond, Do, 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 do. Fever dream, but I'd love to see Larian do a turn-based Fallout. Universal concept with Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and others like that. Yeah. If you're working with someone else's IP, there's always going to be a show Bible you have to adhere to, and someone else you have to talk to that you have to confirm ideas with. Anyway, hopefully that answered your question, Flying Turtle. Thank you for the super chat. Yes, we are live on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, and TikTok to answer that question. Vertical on TikTok, horizontal everywhere else. Just like we are every day. This is the day job. I play a lot of games. And someone just said, stop talking and play the game. Fuck off. We do lots of talking on my channel. If you don't like it, you don't have to tune in. No one is holding a pew-pew to your head and making you watch my streams. I have seen Cowboys and Aliens. It's a great movie. We start every day at about 4 a.m. Central. However, we are in the holidays right now. So the schedule is a little bit different because we are in the holidays. We will be back to the normal schedule on January 5th. So right now I'm kind of only streaming Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and at completely abnormal schedules because I'm taking time off for the first time in 4 years. And I need to get another cup of coffee because we're an hour in and I've only had one.